S2000. As you guys can see, it's black and there's really not much to it, so let's have a closer look. So one interesting thing to note is that these EV vehicles actually do still need cooling. So we're going to be using definitely one of the CSF line products. I'm not exactly sure which one yet. I'm leaning towards one of his oil cooler products. They're a bar and plate design and they should work really well for what we're trying to do. We don't need like a giant full-size radiator, but we do need a cooler to be able to cool the motor as well as the batteries. The engine bay is going to be a really interesting part of this build. It's not going to be typical of my very clean and aesthetically pleasing engine bays. I'm still going to do my best to make it look as good as possible, but we're pretty much going to be filling every inch possible with batteries on this car, and the engine bay is pretty much just going to be a large enclosure with batteries packed into it. So hopefully there's some touches that we can do to make it look really cool, but expect it to be very clean, but don't expect it to be all shaved and tucked and eliminated. It's gonna actually have a lot of stuff probably cluttering and living in the engine bay. I feel like a challenge for me is going to be tackling this interior properly. The overall theme of this car, I really want it to be kind of EV inspired. I want it to look like it could be an electric car from the outside and the inside, but doing that on the inside of a car is definitely a challenge. Especially not with a huge budget to reshape and redesign like all the controls. But I do definitely want to incorporate some like cool trick things in this car. One thing that I've been thinking pretty heavily about is actually using paddle clickers to be able to select for your neutral drive and reverse. So you basically click a paddle and then it'll tell our vehicle unit to put the motor into one of the gears. So I'm thinking maybe like a right click will activate drive, maybe double click so both of them would activate like a neutral gear, and then a left click could be a reverse. So I think that'd be really cool, and to be able to see that gear position on the heads-up display on like the AEM dash or something would be really cool. Something to, that's obviously necessary, but something really neat for kind of the driver experience and kind of the futuristic vibe of the car. I think that could be a nice little touch. Standpoint, I'd say the biggest challenge that we're going to have is actually getting the Tesla drive unit into the back of our S2000. I've seen some people that have done rear-wheel drive retrofits and they've used the entire subframe from the Tesla, the axles, the brakes, etc., just the whole subframe assembly, and just bolted it into the back of our car. Unfortunately, I want to keep a narrow body stance on this car. I want it to look kind of stock, and you're just not going to be able to do that with the entire subframe. The subframe pokes a lot. It's considerably wider than our S2000 is. So with that being said, we are going to have to recreate some of the S2000 arms and rear end pieces because the motor is so big. So actually on that subject, let's have a look at our motor. All right, so here's a closer look at our Tesla drivetrain. If you could see, it is a giant cylinder, kind of T-shaped with a transmission in between it. One of the halves is an inverter, the other half is the actual motor, and then in the middle is the drive axle. So you basically have a transmission in the middle of the T, and that makes it pretty easy to just bolt in some axles and mount your motor. But unfortunately, in our case, the S2000 has very narrow frame rails, so we're gonna have to do a good fair amount of cutting. I have some ideas of kind of like angle pitches that we can try to get the motor in a little bit better place, because our lower control arms are literally like in the way of our Tesla motor. So I'm gonna actually bounce some ideas off of Chris from Wisecraft to see if those ideas could potentially work. But the electric motor it's a pretty big unit. It's in really nice condition, so I'm grateful that it was taken from a low mileage car. I'd like to kind of touch on what all the Tesla mumbo jumbo model etceteras are broken down as. So when you look at a car that has a P on it, that stands for performance. 100, 90, 80, 60, etc. That number is actually how much battery voltage it has. And the D at the end stands for dual motor. So ours, we're just gonna do a single motor. So we're gonna use a single rear Model S motor. I don't know too terribly much about Teslas, but that's just kind of how I've broken it down in my head. I don't actually know if that's accurate, but it should be. All right, guys, so thanks for joining us, and hopefully you'll hit the subscribe button and continue to watch the episodes that we have to come of this really cool electric S2000. See you later. Peace.